Interesting.
That
And
story,
yeah,
I put that story in the book, so I'm not saying anything new, but I feel it's if I were in the FBI today, I would say that's sufficiently interesting for me to put even a junior agent on the case, an intern, somebody, to say, hey, go down to St. Louis or email them or do what you want. Fly to St. Louis, drive to St. Louis, sit for as many days as you want, stay in the Holiday Inn, go through all the C-124 squadrons. There are not that many. Find a guy who worked as loadmaster. It'll be in the records. Out of those guys, find guys from the Pacific Northwest, guys from Washington, guys from Oregon, guys from Idaho, if you like. Have a look. There won't be that many. I mean, they spent 1,000, they looked at 1,000 suspects generated by members of the public, which honestly, when you're asking members of the public to rat on their brother or their cousin, it's getting a bit desperate. Again, I don't want to fault them. What else could they do? But I mean, this is an iterative approach. It's starting with data and working down. It's not starting with a suspect and working the other way.
Well, Darren was saying yesterday, one of the huge difficulties with this case is it's a rare instance where confessions are being made willingly. People almost want their father or husband or brother or uncle to have been DB keeper. So it's very misleading when you hear all these confessions, and it's this guy who pulled off this stunt, and it's cool, and people want to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as you say, there have been suspects proposed by their family members or by colleagues or classmates, and there have been people who confessed. The FBI files in some areas make reference to these people, but in every case, to the best of my knowledge, those persons were eliminated.
Yeah.
And I, as a writer, it would be foolish for me to even spend time thinking about those things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm conscious of time, and I don't want to take up too much more of it, too much more of yours. But I think we should maybe we've sort of naturally at the investigation, I think, and I'm just curious to know what the investigation looked like, just purely from a physical. What were the where was it based? Where was the investigation headquartered? I know you don't want to mention specific names of lead agents involved, but I'm just curious to know what the kind of the next sort of 9 years, how they played out until this quite momentous discovery of the cache at Tina Bar.
Well, I'm honestly not the best person to reply, but I can tell you what I understand. Yeah. The investigation, I think, was pretty much based at Seattle. Seattle was the lead field office for the investigation, by virtue of the hijack being deemed to have happened at Seattle. Portland obviously the Portland field office played a very important role in supporting Seattle, as I understand it. The Reno office also played a very important role in their capacity as the first people on the scene when the airplane landed, and as the people who recovered the tie from the airplane, and did follow-up research on the tie. And the Minneapolis field office played a very important role because Northwest Airlines was based at Minneapolis, and so Minneapolis office handled most of the interviews with flight crew that took place after the immediate aftermath of the flight. So, for example, some stewardesses were interviewed in Minneapolis. The director of flight operations was interviewed in Minneapolis. Those are the ones I know about.
Yeah.
The field work, I guess, as far as I understand, was based in Woodland, Washington. That was the central field office. And the agents handling the ground search worked from there. And they worked in cooperation with other agencies. I think the US Army, I believe sheriff's offices were also involved. But the field search, the ground search, took place, as I said, within this parallelogram defined by Northwest Airlines. For me, I suppose one of the strange things is that once the ground search had clearly was clearly seen to be unproductive, that they didn't try another search elsewhere. And in this respect, they had a specific recommendation from Northwest to say, look, we've had second thoughts. We really think you should search a little bit further north, but more importantly, we think you should search even as far south as the Columbia. That was a written recommendation made by Northwest, and the FBI never took action on that. So that was an opportunity to deploy additional resources, let's say. Possibly just financial commitments precluded that. I don't know. It was an expensive search. Perhaps they did not have a budget to repeat it. Possibly they could not again bring the US Army or other agencies into another search. Military are, they have to get a whole series of permissions at very high levels to assist a civilian law enforcement agency, and possibly those permissions would not have been forthcoming for a second search. All we know is that second search was never done, although Northwest recommended it. And at that point, it seems to me, reading the files, is that the whole strategy then switched to, I would say, two specific directions. Number one, that they interviewed all the parachute clubs in the entire United States, which I think was probably a mistake, because this guy was not a civilian skydiver. His actions were not those of a sports skydiver. And if any, for one probably more important reason, he was way too old to be a sports skydiver. Sports skydiving is something you do when you're 20. You don't do it when you're 45. By that time, you're smarter. You know, you've given it up. Okay, so that it went in that direction. That came up. No. And the other direction they went in was to ask the public to come up with proposals on the basis of the sketches, which, as we know, led to over 1,000 leads, none of which led anywhere. Again, if I were to put myself in the mind of a law enforcement officer, I would not look to the public to help me out, and especially not on the basis of a sketch, which I'm not even confident is accurate or. And I suppose I should say here, there was a profound disagreement between the witnesses regarding the sketches. The sketch A was roundly rejected by the junior stewardess who had been sitting next to the hijacker. Sorry, I correct myself. Sketch A was roundly rejected by the second stewardess. Sketch A was essentially accepted by the junior stewardess, but was rejected by the second stewardess, who had been the first to see the hijacker, who had been profoundly upset by this experience, but she had seen him in a moment of extreme stress, and she had seen him face to face, and she had seen him without the shades. And she said that sketch A, that is not him at all. So the FBI asked her, well, okay, what did he look like? She said, let me look at the catalog. You have got a catalog of facial identification. They showed her the catalog. She went through some pages. She picked a photograph of a real person. She said, that's him. That's the well-known image KK 5.1. She said, that's him. She didn't say that looks like him, that's similar to him. She said, that's him. She said, all you got to do is bring his hairline down, make his ears flatter, and that's him. Well, the FBI attempted to accommodate her. They took the image KK 5.1 and they did some juggling with it. They felt that they were accommodating her in some way, and they came up with the famous sketch B. And then I think nobody accepted sketch B. I don't think the junior stewardess was happy with it. I'm pretty sure that sorry, I'll say that again. I'm pretty sure that the junior stewardess was still much more happy with sketch A. The second stewardess, whom they were trying to accommodate, was not satisfied with sketch B. And I can see why, because when I look at sketch B, it doesn't look like KK 5.1. It's a completely different person. And it's I think documented that the second stewardess was sufficiently unhappy that she repeated this to the press and to the media over many years. And finally, for a television documentary, she participated in a new sketch. The documentary got a sketch artist and they asked him, okay, draw the guy again from this lady. He drew it. It's a completely different sketch. And she said, yeah, that's it. But what she says is not convincing.
Right.
She says it. Yeah. She says it with hesitation.
Okay.
And, so there you got 3 sketches, and there are even more apart from these 3. But all the 3 sketches somehow are wrong.
Yeah.
I have my own sketch, which is on my blog, where I I merged. I'm not an expert in Photoshop, anything like that, but using PowerPoint, I put together the eyes from KK 5.1. I felt that's what hit her. I lowered his hairline. I flattened his ears, like she said we should. And then I took the lower jaw from another person who much later claimed to be the hijacker fraudulently and was arrested and convicted as a fraudster. But the interesting part of that story is that several witnesses, including I think at least one of the stewardesses, said, and they saw this guy, the picture of this guy wearing shades and a woolly hat. And they said, yeah, that's very, very close. But they were only looking at his lower jaw. Something in his mouth and his lower jaw hit them, and they said, that's him. So I combined those two. I have my own sketch with the lower jaw from the fraudster, the upper face from KK 5.1. And I personally like that picture a lot. It's on my blog. I'll send you a link if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, please